welcome back to the most fabulous podcast in the world. And today we're returning to the woman where it all began, the hub of our podcast. We're once again going to be talking about Natalie Barney, but not about more of her life, more about accomplishments that she did. So if you missed that episode and you're listening on YouTube, there will be a card up in the right-hand corner now. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts or on the website, then it is the first episode called Empress of the Lesbians. So we will start with how Natalie Barney got her nickname of Amazon.
Ooh, that's fun.
Bit of a backstory. We have the famous French writer Remy de Gourmont. Now, he has lupus. It has disfigured his face, so he's become a bit of a recluse. Natalie Barney goes about befriending him. It's considered to be one of her conquests, but an intellectual one rather than a romantic one.
No, why does she decide to befriend him?
Because he is a very famous writer. She's read his works, and she enjoys minglings of the mind.
Gotcha. So it's one of those times where she finds a kindred spirit, and I guess this spirit happens to not be a woman, so...
So just friendship.
Right.
So she begins by sending him her new book of short plays and poems, Acts et Entr'actes, and he likes it.
Mm-hmm.
And so he actually goes about inviting her to his apartment, which is huge. He doesn't interact with new people, and especially not with women, because of the whole lupus.
So this is, like, huge. Now, does he know that she's a lesbian? Like, is he aware that this is not going to be a date?
I would say he did not consider it to be a date. It's more a meeting of two writers. But if he didn't know that she was a lesbian then, he knew pretty soon after. Natalie does not hide this fact about herself.
I love this. I love this idea that, like, you know, he can see her not as, like, a person who he would be romantically disappointing, but rather as an intellectual equal.
Yes, so she goes to his apartment, he greets her warmly, and they talk a lot. They develop a correspondence, a daily correspondence. They're writing each other multiple times a week. And she began to show up also to his Sunday gatherings of people.
Mm-hmm. Now, you said before that he doesn't tend to interact with women. Are these all men at his gatherings?
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, as much as, like, the lupus thing, like, I can understand being really insecure about it, that seems kind of sexist at that point. That it's just all men and the one lesbian. Like you don't have to want to do a lady in order to interact with her. You know, she doesn't have to be a lesbian to just be, you know, contributing important work to your genre or whatever.
My dear Pixie, remember, this is France in the early 1900s. Women writers are not considered to be serious writers.
Yeah. It's just come on, dude, you know. And clearly he met an exception, so.
Yes, he actually starts going out again with her as his tag-along. So he goes to her salons on Friday. He goes on trips around France with her and some friends. He may have fallen in love with her.
Oh no. Come on, dude. You had one job. Just hang out with a woman, but make it not be about romance, you know?
I mean, nothing happened, though some of his biographers have tried to call her his mistress.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I don't think that would be true of Natalie. She seemed to have a pretty clear understanding of what she wanted.
Yeah, but people's understanding of very close friendships between men and women is sometimes not in the same ballpark.
Right, yeah, no, men and women can never be friends. That's just true. I mean, obviously. People can't relate over their work. Every encounter between two people has to have some sexual dimension to it, didn't you know? So, what happens in this relationship? Like, what grows from this connection?
He starts writing his letters to the Amazon in the magazine Mercure de France.
And what are these letters about? What are they like?
Now, there are 32 of them in all, and they were bi-monthly until October 1913 when they were gathered into a book. And their topics ranged from memory, chastity, love, survival, physics, and forgetfulness. We have a few quotes here, including Amazon more happily born than all other women, to a conqueror with the bow bent on your naked foot with all the power of womanhood in your heart.
Yeah, that one reads a bit sexier.
Well, the first one started a lot less sexy. It started with an idea or a problem of the emotions often arises between us, my dear friend, and the chances of conversation make us neglect it.
Oh, that's really cool. So these weren't like love letters. They were just letters of discussing like emotional and topical things, I guess.
They were tributes, basically.
Mm-hmm. Wow. How did the public take it?
They were intrigued. And this is really what gives Natalie a lot of intellectual weight in these circles and made people pay attention to her.
Because they knew who she was. They knew that she was the Amazon.
Yes, and how highly Remy de Gourmont saw her and valued her and admired her.
Wow. Yeah, that is high praise.
The closest comparison I can make is if, for instance, I don't know, Lady Gaga took a fondness and admiration to a much younger, just starting out singer, and it made a lot more people pay attention to that singer and take that singer seriously and actually read their work and hang around them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I mean, we do see that happen with like, or directors who are really well known who start to have like a favorite actor, actress, and that person is seen as like cool or special or fancy because it's like, oh, well, this director really likes them, so clearly they must be doing something right.
It also is what cements Natalie's nickname of La Maison, the Amazon. In literary circles in France at this time, there is only one Amazon.
And it's her. Now, at the time, was there like a lesbian connotation to Amazon, or was it just like girl power?
Some of both,
Gotcha.
I would say. This is the time where they're also still very intrigued by ancient Greece.
Mm-hmm.
And so from there we move on to a more well-known enterprise of hers, the creation of the Prix Renée Vivien.
The what?
The Renée Vivien Prize. Named after the poet Renée Vivien, it's an annual poetry prize that actually continues to this day, though now it is under a nonprofit and open to men as well as women.
Ah, but at the time it was only open to women?
Yes, it was created in memory of the poet Renée Vivien.
Yeah, who died young, as I remember.
In her 30s.
Yeah. Oof. So when did Natalie conceive of this?
Partially, it started with the other lover of Renée Vivien, the Baroness van Zuylen van Nieblet.
Mm-hmm.
And then Natalie took it over really in the late 40s and continued it almost until her death.
Mm-hmm. And what did this consist of? Like, how do you get this prize?
It is specifically for French poetry that includes Hellenism in the way that Vivien's poetry did.
So it's like carrying on her legacy by highlighting people who do something similar.
Yes, Hellenistic French poetry.
I kind of love this because it's like we were talking about with the Amazon thing, that she got her nickname from someone kind of becoming a patron of hers and showing others in the artistic world that she was important and valuable. And now here she is giving back to that artistic community and saying, hey, if anyone wants to become well known for doing art, then here's a way to do it.
Yes, and this leads into other setups of hers, which is specifically schemes to help other writers.
Mm-hmm.
The The best well known is teaming up with Ezra Pound to create Bel Esprit.
Mm-hmm. Which is what?
It's a scheme. So they fundraised up to 15,000 francs and then chose two writers, one in English, one in French. Natalie chose Paul Valéry, and Pound chose T.S. Eliot. The money was meant to free the both of them from their day jobs so they would have more time to write. For instance, Eliot was working in a bank at the time.
Mm-hmm.
There was a problem.
Yes.
Neither of them wanted the money.
Love it. So what did they do?
So Eliot completely refused the reward, but the next year he published The Wasteland, attracted a ton of attention, and got a traditional patron, and then left his bank job.
Wow. Rude.
With Paul Valéry, the French literary world had already started to show interest in him, and there was a magazine called the Nouvelle Revue that wanted to take over from Natalie the responsibility of getting funds for him.
And did they succeed? Did he accept funds from them?
Eventually, she resisted at first, finally got them to agree to 15,000 francs, like she had raised along with Pound, and then the patronage went to them for Valéry.
But so Valerie actually accepted the patronage.
From someone else, not from her.
So do we know why these two artists didn't accept this?
From their point of view, it looked like charity, and they didn't want to be charity cases.
Oh. Yeah. No, that is, I mean, it's always been kind of a fraught issue, the issue of like art and money, and the artists need to eat, need to provide for themselves, and anyone who's depending on them. But also, they, want to be seen as independent people who can take care of themselves, and they don't want to be bought as well.
And now there is another tidbit to Bel Esprit. So Pound, though he refused the money himself, he turned around and told Ernest Hemingway to go and ask for some.
Mm-hmm.
And he got it. And then he blew it on betting at a racetrack.
That's such a Hemingway thing to do.
Yes, Natalie remarked, how badly brought up was Hemingway.
Uh-huh. I mean, you only have to read a short story by him to know that, but...
Now, outside of ventures like Bel Esprit, Natalie did just give money to poorer writers, and it was a normal thing to do in her circle of women. The more affluent the heiresses would give money to the younger ones as stipends for writing, or even if they just had a car accident or something like that.
Wow, so it's kind of like the mutual aid that you see today on like blogging platforms. People will like make a post about how they need money for something and then people will donate to them.
In the case of the woman who got money from Romaine Brooks for her car accident, she was surprised because she wasn't even aware that Romaine had heard about what had happened to her and let alone had asked her.
Wow, that sounds nice. And I gotta admit, the blogging circles that I'm on, at least, I'm not really aware of any heiresses, so maybe someone needs to put them in touch with the current need.
Now, we have her last big venture with women and the arts and writing. We have the Académie des Femmes, which is started in 1927, which is started in response to the French Academy, which only men were allowed in. They had 40 men, all called the Immortals.
Right. And the French Academy was like a really big deal. That was like where culture came from, right?
It is the preeminent French council for matters pertaining to the French language. So pretty much people decided these were the creme de la creme of the French writers.
Do we know who were did they just vote internally on who was allowed into the academy or?
So a candidate would make an application for a specific seat in the academy, if any seats were vacant.
How would seats get vacanted?
They're elected by the Académie themselves.
Gotcha. Yeah. Yeah. So it's a very internal thing, which I'm sure we can all see would be a great potential for a boys' club. Um, so, and even today, there's people are still a bit upset at like France as a whole for limiting the new words that are allowed in their language officially. Every single French word is a French word. They're not allowed to have words like cell phone or text, or as opposed to like German, Germany right next to France. They have the verb Simpson from the SMS abbreviation. They have the word internet from the word internet. French doesn't allow stuff like that.
Well, once again, 1927, women writers are not taken very seriously.
Right. Yeah. So forget about new technology. Women, period, weren't allowed to be making any kinds of rules.
So Natalie already has her salon, now at 20 Rue Jacob. So she dedicates certain Fridays to an individual woman. For instance, several honorees were Colette, Anna Wickham, or Gertrude Stein. And that Friday, it was an entire showcase of her work.
Wow. Yeah, talk about like giving that person some exposure, like giving them a chance to show how good they are. That's really impressive.
It should be noted that it was not only, say, a reading of the woman's work. For instance, Colette, who had gone into pantomime, she actually played several of the scenes of her novel La Vagabonde before it was released in front of an audience for her Friday.
Wow. That sounds amazing. And it also, yeah, it sounds like it wasn't just like breaking ground in terms of allowing women to have a platform, but also in terms of allowing that platform to be beyond just the written word.
Yes, it was also for both English and French women writers. It wasn't just only French.
No! The French and English are natural enemies. Everyone knows that.
The Napoleonic Wars had been over for a century.
Well, I mean, literally maybe, but culturally.
Men were also allowed to show up at these events.
To show up, you said, but not to be showcased.
No, they had to focus on the honoree rather than talk about themselves.
Love it. Was this ever hard for men?
If it is, it has not been recorded.
Mm-hmm. Wow. Typical feminazis silencing the men. That's good. I'm glad that they allowed for something to kind of balance things out, even the scales.
Yes, well, if the men were taken seriously at the time, what better way to drag the women up to the same level of importance, if not by having the men view their work and decide it was praiseworthy?
Right. Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah, and that does bring up the point of like in a lot of like bad or superficial feminist discourse, it's kind of like, oh, we need to like tear down those men because men are so bad. And while it's very easy to become disillusioned with men because of the ways that they are trained to ignore and belittle and diminish the achievements of women, it is really important to see men as allies, as potentially able to use the privilege that they're given in society to help raise up women. Yeah, so I'm glad that Natalie saw that and that she helped them do that. She gave them that opportunity.
And that is the major works, aside from her own writing, of course, of Natalie Barney.
I love it. So she wasn't just out there, doing all those women. She was also out there supporting women. She was helping the artistic culture of France become elevated by giving more people the opportunity to participate in it. I love it.
Yes, but remember, when you win literary prize money, don't blow it at the racetrack.